Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of ManCave Mondays. I am Fidel, aka Charisma.
Steve.
Ben.
Boboyer.
Yep. So, guys, today we have a guest. We are going to do it a bit different. Our guest is fairly known to most of our followers because we share circles more like.
Yeah.
So we want to know him, know his journey, get to learn from him, and generally just interact.
Yes.
So I'd like to introduce himself.
Introduce yourself. Oh, my name is Omondi Ochuka. It's awesome. ManCave. I've always thought about ManCave. At some point, I just wanted to tell him, sorry. Like, I come sometime.
Man, karibu, man. Karibu.
They always say at it's given moment, you just get to do it.
Yeah.
So we're here today to learn, not just about me, but also about ourselves.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be here.
So
The feeling is mutual.
Kabisa.
leave it your own device. So guys, for what we want to talk about today generally is just one of the great time with an epidemic of our generation or something. The cancer struggle that's continually becoming a threat to the generation. It used to be seen like a grown people thing, but we're progressively seeing younger people
and rich people thing.
It used to be seen like when we talk of lifestyle, it used to be considered a lifestyle disease at some point, which was affecting a certain class of people. But as we progress, we realize it's affecting our generation so much. So we have Omondi today. Omondi, as you let us know later on, has been living with cancer. Do you say living with cancer or fighting cancer?
I personally prefer living with cancer. Yes.
For the last 8 years. So our start point should be to ask Omondi to tell us about his cancer, what type, the diagnosis, then we can pick from there.
I was diagnosed with cancer of the liver. It's called hepatocellular carcinoma. It's one of the most common liver cancers. I have to mention a few things about liver cancer. One, it's very hard to diagnose. And when it is diagnosed, often it's late stage, when interventions that are put against it may not really work. That means it's maybe stage 4 or end of life stages, maybe stage 5. This is stage 5, I will talk about it. One of the reasons it's something called vague symptoms. Like, I remember how I was diagnosed. Let me talk about it shortly. We were chatting outside Ganthiway after class on a Friday, on 11th of November. So just like we're chatting here. And the last thing I know, I remember is a friend of mine called Father. I was telling him I'm feeling fasty. And after that, I wake up in a hospital in a strange environment. Between there, I don't really remember. So between that episode of me blacking out, I was just healthy. I was just an okay person. I was a 19-year-old who was just in first year doing this thing in college, and everything was just fine. And they kept on asking me, were you feeling sick before this? Were you admitted? Have you been feeling off yourself? And I was telling them, I've been feeling okay. So vague symptoms are actually things to do with fever, headache, pain, joint pains, vomiting. These are things that could happen to any person. If you don't even necessarily have to be sick. You can be and then you could say how you're feeling like So you find these are the same things that they tell you to look at when you're like diagnosing cancer. But it takes a bit of some scans and tests to actually reveal and diagnose and even stage it. So when I was rushed to Aga Khan Hospital by my friends. And I wake up the following on a Saturday. That's why when I wrote on Facebook on 12th of November, that's the day I was diagnosed with cancer. And they couldn't diagnose it straightforward. They just told me, you don't look okay. We have done a couple of tests. We are not certain if it is cancer or if it's just a liver disease. But they kept also asking me, do you smoke? Do you drink? Because they want to rule out a few issues. And given my answer, they were a bit, 50-50. They were not sure, because a lot of patients also do lie about their information. Because for one thing, I think most, like you talked about it, many people feel like if you have a cancer diagnosis, then you probably caused it. Either you're
It's
drinking
your fault.
excessively, it's your fault, or you're eating kachumbari zile roiko. And then you find out recent studies and recent research and recent cases that are coming up. It doesn't actually point towards lifestyle much. Lifestyle is a huge contributor, yes, but it doesn't follow that suit. Yes, so they did a couple of tests. They did CT scan, they did MRI. The CT scan it's like an X-ray for the inside. They could see how the liver is. The liver can enlarge. I was told it is distended, it's enlarging, it's inflamed, and it is bruised. Those ones showed in the ultrasound. We can't know the type of cancer I had until they do something called a biopsy. And a biopsy is generally when they took tissue from the cell in the liver, usually using a very special needle. It's not very painful, but maybe kidogo. And then they take it to the lab. And then they also take something called a liver function test. A liver, like we know, it does a lot of stuff. Like I think it's one of the busiest organs in, especially the heart and brain. It's one of the busiest organs. It does a lot of stuff. And there's also what is called tumor markers. Like they could take a simple blood test, separate the blood, and then maybe check the profiling, proteins, and all that. There's also something called alpha ferroprotein. It's very important when diagnosing liver cancer. For somebody who is not pregnant and it's a male, if the units are above 400, it means there could be something wrong with your liver. And mine was basically more than that. It was around 460 something. Now, if it is more and you're a female, it means maybe you're pregnant. Yes. So they did that, and they told me, I remember when they told me, you don't look good and your liver is distending and it's inflamed, and the ultrasound is showing that you probably have a very bad infection. A blood infection could cause the liver to actually scar. So I felt something was wrong, and I was like, just give it in 10 minutes. I mean, it can't be that, it can't be good. So I was like, we can't be sure, because doctors don't always want to be,
the bearers of bad news.
Yeah. Also breaking that news is very tough. So I think they went back with this team, and they told me some of the results are coming in the afternoon. That was around 10 a.m. on Saturday. And when the results come in, I think we'll be able to tell you for certain what really is the case. Yes.
So at this point, you said it's a fairly hard to diagnose cancer. So I don't know how to call it. So was it luck on your end, or how do I put it? At what stage was yours detected?
It was stage 2, and that was a lucky punch because, like I told you, sometimes I always feel like it was my luck. Because I imagine if I had just gone through my life, maybe treating some other thing, which happens for most cases, and I would get it at stage 4. That means I would really have very slim chances. And there's another statistic about liver. I don't like talking about statistics because they annoy me. I'm a statistician, I'm a math person. But sometimes, because also I've also defined them, so sometimes I find it I just humorize it. I don't find any offense in them. Liver cancer, from stage 1 to stage 4 or 5, the survival rate in between a period of maybe say 0 to 5 years, the survival rate could be 28%. Now if you progress, it could drop to a decline of maybe 7%. So you can imagine now surviving it is very hard. And also, since blood flows through the liver a lot to other places or from other places, it means that cancer that started as primary liver cancer, there are also 2 things that I should talk about. There is primary liver cancer and the secondary. Primary liver cancer is one that actually originates in the site, the liver. Secondary, it could come from another place and then it spreads to the liver. On both cases, you find that if you have liver cancer, the metastasis can really happen very fast, spreading because of blood. And it could also, most cases, any type of cancer has potential places it could spread to. For liver, mostly it's the bone and the lung. It's very hard to find it spreading to other distant sites. Yes, I'll talk about that later on.
So it's been 8 years for you, yeah?
Yes.
I wanted to ask now, what the question I would really like to ask that, like now, what's a typical day for you when you're out of the hospital or before? And having it in mind that this came as a shocker to you and the average, what are some of the lifestyle changes that you've had to undergo what has become different from when you were just the normal 19-year-old student to what you have to do now? Are there things you love to do then that you cannot do now? Are there things that you didn't do then that you've now picked now?
First of all, we have to talk about perspective. Life is basically a lot about perspective. And the thing they say about perspective, it takes a lot of time to actually change it. People say, I always tell people, it's a very common thing. People tell you, why can't you change work? Change is one of the hardest things to do, actually. And as much as human beings are actually patterned people, you can actually break down a person into who they are and maybe look into a typical day of what they go through and their mindset. But I think perspective, when cancer happens to you, that's the moment you realize, wow. Because one statistic around you is very grim. So the first instinct is about death. And if the instinct of death comes into you, you feel like, you ask yourself the basic question, how long do I have to fight this? Or how long am I going to be here? And then the other thing is, what will be the interruptions my life will be going through? When it came to me in 2011, it actually sort of like stopped my momentum, and I just had to like sit back for a while and then think about my life. I had a future I'd planned. At my first year, I'd already gotten a scholarship at Iowa University. I'd already started. And I imagined myself after 4 years, I'm enrolling for my master's. I wanted to do my PhD by age 27. So you see, that is something that has actually been put to a stop, or it is actually inhibited for a moment. You can't think about your future as far as you would have when you were just a normal person going through life. So I think the interruption is one of the things that many people go through when they have a diagnosis. That interruption sort of reminds you of how fickle life is, and it reminds you to actually put your things in order, which is one of the hardest things to do as a human being, because human beings, we love patterns. We love, you're born, struggle, crawl, go to school, college, marry, find love of your life, maybe job or apple, and then be something, a career or something. But when that happens, it means that thought process is interrupted. So I think it was a really hard thing for me, because school was important to me, and the life was also important to me, because I couldn't school if my life is under Siege, you know. So I'm here, my ass is smoked up, and I'm wondering now, where do we take this? And by this time, I don't have a diagnosis yet. It's still not in the afternoon. It is this wild thoughts of my life fighting each other. And
so you've been given the possibility,
exactly. You're actually anticipating it. It's something also called anticipatory grief. Have you ever had someone who is sick, or like, let's say a relationship, you know, things are in the rock, you know it's going to end. So you're like anticipating a breakup. It's always not a very good moment to really. So I have all these wild thoughts. Another thing I also have to talk about is a year, not even a year, 10 months before my diagnosis, I lost my girlfriend. She had sickle cell. Like, we know sickle cell is very closely related to cancer. And I also lost a baby. One of our twins, she had twins. And one of them was stillborn. So I had just a baby who was in the incubator. I was 17 at that point. And it was really tough, because I'm a very quiet person. Very few people knew in my life. So I was handling all this grief. I went to college with it, with very few knowing it.
What are the timelines for the?
That was 2010.
Yes. No, between losing the child and
I lost the child on 15th of February, 2010. After 5 months, I lost my girlfriend. Then 2011.
Then a year later, you get diagnosed.
So you can imagine there's a lot of death thoughts on my head. Like, wow, these wild cards. How do you deal with that? You know. But sufficiently enough, I'm one person who have a very strong fortitude, like self-fortitude. So I always find myself processing things first before actually telling even my friend or my grandma, who is like really my closest person. Yeah, so typically in a day without a hospital, one thing I really struggle with sleeping is, I don't want to call it insomnia. Everybody is always calling things like that insomnia, but I don't want to call it that. So what I do is I find ways to calm my spirit, because you can imagine you're sleepless, you have pain. I'll talk about chronic pain later on. Chronic pain is a very essential part of my life. It's like on and off, but pain is like always featuring in my life. and then you're also thinking about how to survive outside your illness, and you're imagining always this back and forth of trying to come out of your illness, like at least for one day or for some few moments, be something separate from my cancer. So I try to do that. I try to meditate. I read a lot and write a lot. I also paint, especially into the night, and I also find myself sleeping. Typically, I always sleep between 2 and 4 because at 4 I have to wake up and read. I have to wake up and do my meditation. This actually helps me into setting into the day, because if you prepare your thoughts, I find myself, if I prepare my thoughts, I'm able not to control them. I'm able to actually embrace them by processing them. Because I realized one thing when I was processing my grief, I was also processing my cancer. But cancer never told me, we can put this on hold, you can put school on hold, you can put this aspect of your life on hold. All those things were still happening to you. So all these things can actually overwhelm you, and that is what I always want to avoid before day breaks. I want to go into the day with, even if it's painful, or even if I'm having pain or I'm really sick, there's something called a flare. A flare is when like you're sick. As cancer, it's very hard to say. Like if you ask me, how do you feel? How does cancer feel? It's very hard to answer that question, because one, I could feel like, I always tell people the malaria feeling, because that malaria is very common for people. Many people have been have gone through malaria. So if you tell that malaria feeling, it's very easy. You're actually reaching them half the bridge. So if I tell you I'm having that malaria feeling, one, I'm having fever, maybe nausea, maybe sweating and all that. Yeah. So it makes cancer not become just something very distant from people. I'm actually bringing them close to what I'm going through and telling them this is something that actually can happen every other day. So after that, I like to make uji. I'm a uji person. I don't take tea. Prepare. I also clean a lot, because I don't know, I just like an organized place. So I arrange in my small room. I live in a very small room. And then I have to look at what I have to do over the day, like through the day. If it's reading again, if it's making music or writing, or if I can take a walk. I also do charity walks, and I've partnered with Nairobi Hospital. Sometimes I go help the kids at the pediatric ward, paid kidogo. And they're doing was a teaching assistant. I didn't talk about that. I was teaching at the University of Teaching Economics. So if I have a class, maybe I have to plan for it prior so that I get there on time. And I never used to stay in school. Once I'm done with the class, I come back, because you never know what will happen with you when you're in school. Yeah.
If maybe I could just check one last concern. And let my are you my brother?
We are colleagues.
Willis lawyer.
But hata kabla useme, as in wase note, umse ni brilliant manze. Umse anadu kila kitu.
So let me just put this to you. When you get this diagnosis, there's always this, I don't know how to put it how to put it nicely, but you tend to have people probably in the same space. Somebody probably suffering the same. I don't know what it fate. So let me say you get a fellow cancer patient. You encourage each other. You fight this together. I wanted to ask if you ever lost someone, but being that you know each other, we follow each other. I know that you're very close to Jadudi. Jadudi, for those who remember his story, the guy we lost to a brain tumor. So how does that make you feel when you are somebody who's undergoing the same thing? You're probably both hopeful that you're going to come out of it. Then somebody succumbs. So how does that leave you feeling? What does it make you?
Let me talk about Jadudi. I have a track in Duyanashi. It's called Jadudi. It's called Rainy Days. Jadudi's death was one of the hardest I've ever experienced. One is because the last 5 months of his life, it was more or less he was going to die. Many people didn't have hopes for him. He was bedridden for the last 15 months of his life. So you could imagine the pain and the back and forth. And I've also talked about the back and forth with cancer. One moment we could be here, and then the next moment, Fidel, if you call me, I'll tell you, but then you may be admitted. So you never know. A flare could come from anywhere. So I think it was one of the toughest things, because one, Jadudi is one of my long-term friends. I knew him 15 years ago. We went to the same high school. We went to the same college, different departments, of course. And Jadudi was diagnosed 9 months after I was diagnosed, and I got to tell him about my cancer when he was diagnosed. Yeah, so Jadudi was a really close friend. Actually, it's a big loss for me. I've never been able to feel it. And the other thing is, when Jadudi passed on, we had been struggling for a while. He left a trailblazing debt of close to 10 million. You can imagine. And this guy was just amazing. He had 7 knives to his head. I've never seen anybody who is stronger like that. Because you can imagine, the skull has one of the highest pressure points in the body. It hit a point where the skull was really weak. So they had to put like a titanium plate on it to and he really fought it. I remember one time when Jeff was asking him, do you think about death? And Jeff asked me the same question, because for me, I really thought about it all the time. And I think also we are different people. Jadudi was very bubbly and outspoken and happy. He was a happy soul. Me, I was melancholic. You could always see it in my writing. I think it's also partly what I've been through, and also I really keep a lot inside. So his death sort of really hit me so bad. As much as at some point, the last 5 months when he came back into Kenya from India, and we took him to ICU and HDU in KNH. I was going there every day in the morning and in the afternoon, because I live close to KNH. It was tough. You could imagine your friend is laying there, huwezi mwongelesha, and the only thing anaweza kushow is a tear. Not because he was sad, I didn't know what that tear meant. Sometimes he was happy. Maybe if he jammed a few Tupac songs and a few Papa Wemba songs and all that, things he liked or jams he liked, he would smile, but he couldn't talk to me. He couldn't tell me, bro, no miapa. That's a lot of pain that is actually very, very usual, very common with cancer. You could ask me, bro, or there's a pain I cannot touch. As this thing I was telling somebody who was asking me, why do you write so painful stuff? Because sometimes I want to see how my pain looks like. That's why I write it out, I put it out in ink and I look at it and maybe I heal from it in a way. So Jadudi was one of the people I lost, and there was a friend of mine, a young boy who was 10 years old. I was wondering why does a 10-year-old deserve such a death, and for him also it was very hard, because the day his biopsy result came, that is the day he died. All these 3 months previously, the mother had been struggling to go to hospitals and they would find nothing, zero. When the cancer result came in, it was stage 4 lymphoma. So you can imagine what wasn't done right before that. So those are questions that happen when somebody close to you is battling cancer. You also imagine, am I going to be next when they die?
Yeah, and I wanted to ask on that note, because you said Jadudi was diagnosed after you.
Yes.
And I can imagine, I'm just thinking, I'm looking at it from a perspective, I'm thinking it's me and this person was diagnosed after me. That's a thing that's in my head. Now I got it before him, and now I'm seeing him suffering like this.
There's also another thing I have to talk about. It's called survivor's guilt. I feel it because what is the word? I'm questioning, am I special than people who've died and they probably had better chances than me? Is my 8 years worth than these people who had maybe a month or a few weeks or even a day? So sometimes it feels like maybe I'm not that important. My story is not that important. But then comparing these things, sometimes it just gets split. But I think the best thing for me, for people who have died who are closer to me, including Jadudi, is just, I think they would love for me to share my story and also inspire people like they did. So that is exactly what I'm trying to do at the moment in honor of the memory.
So just one last one, February to Steve. We're going just to give a small comparison to just saying. Personally, I think the one comment I've ever made is that I don't like talking about cancer. Because when I was in first year, I lost a 3-year-old cousin to stage 5 liver cancer. At Moi referral. So we had putting out of life support and everything, and just watching my struggle, they'll be taking a last breath and dying. Has it at some point occurred to you? Like, remember this is something I said and some people thought it was insensitive in a way. Has it at some point occurred to you, like when you're now looking at the Jadudi helpless for the last 5 months, is there a point you've ever said that death is a better option than the pain?
Yeah, I think at the moment it's a very it's a prominent thought in my head. I'm feeling like if euthanasia were legalized in Kenya, I would opt for it. Because one, at some point I have to choose myself over other people. Because when you're choosing death in such a manner, people will call you selfish because your life includes other people who still want you to stay, but they're not in your shoes. They're not experiencing your pain. You know, even your mother could be there, but they do not know exactly what pain you're experiencing. And it's a big dilemma because one, our country is very known for hypocrisy, and then our country is also very religious, especially pro-Christian. Christianity does not favor euthanasia to an extent. And then three, it's very hard to know. For example, me today, I look very okay, but maybe scans could say another thing. All right, so it's very hard to know at what point do you make that decision. And then the other thing is, for example, like Ken, of course, or your cousin, who gets to make that decision? It's a very heavy one because if you make it, I remember when Jadudi came in, I also would just bring him in a bit. The doctor who was receiving him said, "You guys are wasting money," and the mother refused. The mother said, "My child will die the way he is supposed to die." Actually died in his sleep peacefully. But you can question, was it worth it? Was it worth the pain that he experienced during that period when maybe they could have let him go? Or what valuable inspiration or life teachings did we get out of his last lives? You know, let's say we could just maybe split it into 10 months, the last 10 months of his lives. So these things are big. You realize life is sort of maybe a big paradox. And I think at the end of the day, for such a thing to happen, you need one, people who are close to you, they need to be a part of that decision. You need to bring them closer. Like I told you, if I want to make it and it was legalized in Kenya, I would bring people, my friends, I would call you like this, would have tea, and I would prepare you on a journey. It's also something that happens in what is called palliative care. Palliative care is the care given to people who are endless. There is no any treatment option available for them. Theirs is to just give them comfort, give them love, also let them have their affairs in order and all that. So it's also a very heavy one. You might be prepared, like I am always ready for death since my diagnosis. But my people, are you, my friends, ready for me dying? I don't think you might be. I don't think the answer is a simple yes or no either. So at one point you could say, hey, by the way, Ochuka, by the way, but you're gonna fall rest to this thing should just leave you alone. And at some point you're like, no, man, you keep fighting, man. This thing could change. So it's never a simple answer. And these are the things that should start a conversation in Kenya. Because I think our medical fraternity needs a lot of laws and not a lot of not just laws written on paper, but a lot of shift in how we think as a nation. Yeah.
Do you feel like it's a very foreign concept?
Yes, it is
to the general Kenyan society? Because I think most of the questions we are asking, we are genuinely asking them, and it's not because we are not well-read people. It's just because growing up, the way growing up you would be told this is what to avoid when discussing a certain disease. We've never really been told that about cancer. So do you feel...
Before he answers, I feel like what he said before is actually what resonates with me, in that it is just a Christian concept that there is a way you're supposed to die, and there is a way you're supposed to be, and there is some sanctity of life regardless of what
I'm not even discussing euthanasia. I'm just talking about how we look at cancer as Kenyans. The reason why we would not empathize with his argument of perhaps the pain is too much, I have a right to say when it has to stop, is because it's perhaps a concept we've never really wrapped our heads around.
I genuinely think that the difference, as you said, is the one thing that's really fundamental is no one really knows the pain that you're going through. You see, it's only a person who's going through cancer who can actually think about that thing in an objective way, because he's actually feeling the pain. You see, when I speak, I'm speaking from a point of Fidel vile na feel tu vile wewe unafanya, as in si understand situation yako, sijui vile unasema vile mimi nakuona, sijui kama unaumia hata at the moment.
And I usually agree with that, sababu when it comes to deciding on that, it's based on your personal experience.
Exactly.
So if you go to the army and there is a war and someone is almost at the verge of death, they're given a mercy killing. If you go, say, to the village and someone is maybe sick to some point where they cannot sustain themselves, maybe the medicine man there will say, it's my treatment here is done, this person we can just pray for them and until they
just
go,
to make it closer to our generation, there are people who love cats and dogs and everything. Why is it so easier when you go to a vet and probably
put it
your
down.
pet is in so much pain?
We
treat our pets so well, such that
to go through the pain.
We don't even think twice about the decision. You say let it rest.
Yeah, but I think we are all in agreement in that when it happens to you or someone that you really care about, the perspective will be different.
But before we go to Bob, I think there's a step
just because I've never sat with anyone mwenye akona cancer.
Me too.
I followed Jadudi on Facebook when he died, and of course it was, and I think he's already talked about it because I wanted to ask him kama Jadudi. You saw us, what we knew about Jadudi is we just knew it from Biko, and probably maybe the scandal with Zawadi Nyong'o and all those people. And his death was still so sad for us, And now I was just trying to imagine, like, for him, and because I know they were really good friends. So this is the first time, I'm actually interacting with someone. Honestly, I've never sat down with anyone battling cancer or fighting cancer. So Stalia, I'll compose myself yet.
Even as you go back to Njugush asking these questions, I just wanted to take us back into what you said. Why these things at times they become so subjective. Because when I look at Ochuka this way, he'll tell me he has the pain. I might not resonate. I would not even be happy to hear him saying that to him he has always been open to the idea of euthanasia. Now I try to compare it. There's a word I used to when I lived in Kenyatta for a while. So once in a while I take a walk. I think it's called word 1E. Where we have those
orthopedic word.
No, it's the cancer word for children.
For the children, yes.
So I look at Ochuka in this body. Like we sit here, we talk all these things men talk about before we started shooting, all the jokes we were making. And you see him smiling and happy. So I would not be okay with him thinking about euthanasia. But then I pictured back my head, my 3-year-old cousin, lying there, you can see from their expression they are in pain. They can't express it in any way. They can't say what they're feeling, but you can see they're in pain. And you've clearly been told, that there is no other treatment option. You see, when at times you feel like that decision would be easier to make, than in other cases.
Than in other cases. That's very true, because one we have to look also at the circumstances. There are times, like in 2012, I survived 2 comas. One was 43 days and the other was 2 weeks. So at that point, actually I was really sick. You would see, there's a point when cancer starts to manifest itself. Right now I can say I'm really good. Sometimes I always don't even think I'm sick. But at that point I was sick, I was vegetative, I was stuck.
Hey, Manze, I'm so sorry guys. Hata mimi sijui stuff kabisa. So ukiwa kwa coma, basically you are
half dead. What do you remember ukiamka if you did not dream?
Nothing.
You sleep.
So for 43 days,
I don't have.
You don't have memory.
It's a blank and.
So when you woke up, you remember. For you are like in day one.
No, what you do first of all, it's sort of like episodes of hallucination, because one, the environment is still strange to you, so your brain is still trying to pick and find, do I know this guy? Because when I woke up, I found my grandmother sitting there, and I was thinking, I know this woman. You see that? And then and sometimes it can happen almost instantly. You just get to pick, but it's very rare. Because it's like the best thing I can. How many people have eaten wheat cookie? I have sometimes.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Children of God.
Children of God. So that high moment, that is what I always try to liken it with. And honestly, I don't remember any other thing in between there. It was just blank for me.
Okay.
So there's something we hadn't touched on, and I think it's also a very important aspect.
Okay.
The treatment. What's it like to go through radiotherapy, chemotherapy? Of course, you'll outline for us in which order you took all of these treatments up to date.
Okay.
And what are some of the side effects?
All right. Now let's just start from somewhere. When you're diagnosed with cancer, what are the questions you're supposed to ask? This is for everybody who actually is going through it still at the moment, or not to anticipate it, but if you happen to go through it, these are questions that are important to you. You are supposed to know what name, what diagnosis do you have, what stage, how advanced is it, how is it spreading, what is the nature. And then two, you have to know the treatment plan. Treatment plan is the ways, the choices the doctor will take according to your test results so that they can cure the cancer or manage it. And then you're supposed to know the cost or estimates. If you have an insurance or if you do not have, how are you supposed to plan towards that? And then you can also look at what tests and scans will be done to you. Some of them are painful, some of them are not. What will happen during that moment? And then you can also look in terms of aspects of your life, your work and productivity. You can also look at how it will affect your sex. Sex is very important for life. I think so. And then if it's a child, you can also look at how they will get integrated back into their friends, their schooling and all that. If it will stop for some moment. If you're employed, maybe you want to talk to your employer about it. See if you can manage a deal, a compromise, because there are days you cannot go to work, there are days you cannot go to school. And then also side effects of your treatment or side effects of your cancer generally. So these are very key questions you're supposed to ask. Anytime you go for clinics, they're very important. They could guide you in terms of navigating. Now back to it, you asked about the treatment plan. When I was diagnosed with cancer, there's one thing that happened. HCC, hepatocellular carcinoma, is one, it's not very responsive towards chemo. But the reason why we opted for chemotherapy is one, it was inoperable. An inoperable cancer means you cannot actively have surgery on it. Otherwise, it will be lethal because one, of overbleeding, or it could actually trigger the metastasis, the spreading. And then also another thing that could render surgery not permissive is one, if you have a cirrhotic liver cancer. Cirrhotic liver cancer means it was caused by cirrhosis. Cirrhosis is a liver disease. So if you have cirrhosis has a tendency of spreading tumors all throughout the liver. So you can imagine, that means you either have to have a transplant, which is removing the liver and finding a donor and replacing it. But if you had a hepatocellular like mine, which was non-cirrhotic, I didn't have any liver disease, it means I could opt for resection. Resection is cutting that part of the liver that is affected and it will grow back. Like there's a Greek myth about Prometheus that, he went and stole something on Mount Olympus, and then he was charged. So the ego was, pecking on its liver and to grow back. That's how the Greek knew it would. The liver always grows back. That's a statement, by the way. So I had chemo. The reason why we opted for chemo was supposed to shrink my tumor to a certain extent. Up to that point, when my cancer was diagnosed, the tumor was about 5 to 6 centimeters huge. So if it shrunk kidogo and left the portal vein, it means we could cut that back. But if it was big as it was when it was diagnosed, if we cut it, it would be fatal. So we had to do rounds of chemo and radiotherapy and pills also in the mix. Now what is a chemo? Well, for liver cancer, liver cancer, you don't do the chemo they do often. It's very rare, especially at diagnosis. They put a catheter directly to the liver. But chemo generally is just like, how many people have like donated blood or like omongeze or maji? It's just the same thing, IV into your veins and it goes into the sides. So I had that. So for a long time we were struggling with chemo radio so that it could shrink the tumor, and then we could actually look at a possibility of a surgery. And that took close to about 2.5 years. It was a really tough time because chemo has side effects. When you're going through it or when you're having the treatment, it's just an IV. But after that, the effects are bad. It's nausea, diarrhea, constipation, all this bad thing. Your hair falls. I remember one time when I was in Hall 11 and I went to the shower and you do this, and like right now, I don't have hair. So you do this and the hair is out all of it. You get scared, like, what the fuck am I dying and I'm seeing? Because when your hair falls, it's like, part of you is dying. So it's scary. And then the usual things are mostly about the nausea and not being able to keep food. Like you were asking me why I was eating half of a chapel. Because if I force it, it will come out. So I always eat, spread my eating. Take small bits over a period of time. And then also, the other thing is also, radiotherapy is just basically very simple. It's just a machine, like the ones they do for MRI. Yeah, you just lay there and then they target it. You could put some cover on your head or on the place, and then they target the laser beams to it. That's just basically radiotherapy. It's basically painless, but it could have effects. Like for people who have something called Hodgkin's lymphoma, it could have side effects on your hearing. It could have effects on your memory. Something called chemobrain as well. You could lose memory. Just basic thinking. Like I would not remember where my phone is, or would pee on myself, incontinence, because you cannot control your body as much as you would want to. So those are the things that happen when you're going through treatment. So that is what I did between 2011 and 2014. After that, the cancer started spreading. It went to the brain and into the bones. And after that point, we have to evaluate. We have to, check what do we do different that we've done before. And among them was brachytherapy. At that point, I don't think brachytherapy was in Kenya. Brachytherapy is also very simple. I will break it down a bit. It's like they have some tumcheles. They are radioactive things. So to do it, since my cancer was inoperable, you can't directly operate on it. What they did, they drilled some hole on my thigh, and then they put a catheter. Catheter is basically a tube, and then they send the seeding into the site. Known to me as some camera to monitor. So I could do it. That is something I did in India in 2016 because it was not available here. And then also stem cell transplant. It's still not very feasible in Kenya. Anybody doing it in Kenya, I don't think that's a huge risk. So India was a good option for that. And then we also have other ways of treating liver cancer, like embolization, which means liver. One thing about tumors feed on nutrients. So embolization is just like cutting the blood supply into the tumor. It means the blood will find its way of using other vessels, but not to the portal vein where my tumor was. So they wanakanyageo blood flow, you see in the tumor, and then it kills it. Because without nutrients and oxygen, the cells cannot multiply. Yeah, and then there are others that maybe you could go and just everybody watching could go and research their Beat, Future and Ultra Mode, and most of them are not available in Kenya.
Midnight come to life at noons. Would you still love me if any day I could be boxed in the wood? I know how to pray, so I scribble another pain on my rhyme book. I write till I hear angels cry out on the roof. So many poems still stuck in a body. I knew strange how time didn't heal my wounds. Scholar from my mama's womb, warrior since grandma survived with us. Am I self-imprisoned with these bars? No flashy truck on the billboard. Friends don't stay long when they realize you're stuck. They go, the world is not our home. I wonder where we all go when the chips are down. But when I put pen to the paper, I heal once more. How could I know when I spill my soul to scribe? I'm bleeding sorrow, I'm broken, faithless, horrified and terrified of the process. What's the meaning of these deaths I talk of every day? My scars play orchestra before I'm gone. I'm writing all this letter. I seal this verse with some holy temper. Peel graphite out of pencils, call me woodpecker. Old scars, new wounds, the clocks rewind time after time. I use pain as an instrument. I walk on broken escalators of my DNA. I walk by faith and never by sight. They give me time, so I'm in the pen, reversing errors with unmatched grace. And though the future goes astray with every thought that comes next.
It would rain forever.